Well, good Monday morning to you, lovely ladies and gentlemen. Steve Collins coming to you from beautiful San Antonio, Texas, the second most powerful, passionate, purposeful coach and speaker in the world. I'm going to talk to you today about an interesting subject. As you know, I usually go extremely deep on my videos, and lately I've been doing a series of simple truths, simple principles, and simple realities that you can begin to apply immediately. Forgive me again for this funky view. I left my thingy for the windshield in the back. So, teaching people how to treat you. Teaching people how to treat you. There is a training program that Keller Williams puts on called BOLD, which stands for Business Objective, A Life by Design. And there are a lot of what they call BOLD laws, or these principles that are spoken about from time to time that are basically biblical principles that have been rebranded a little bit, because all principles that are eternal typically come biblically from a spiritual perspective, because they are universal. They don't apply to certain, nobody's excluded from principles. We don't have to worry about people who don't believe in gravity. You have the right not to believe in gravity. And if you jump off a building, you're probably going to hit the ground. So you don't have to believe in gravity to be subject to the laws of gravity. Well, principles are very much the same way. Reaping and sowing. People will say, what you put out comes back to you. Karma, what goes around comes around. This is a principle of reaping and sowing. That's just an example of a principle, okay? What you put out comes back to you. So teaching people how to treat you. This BOLD law says you teach people how to treat you. Well, how do you teach people how to treat you? This, my friends, is an ongoing organic evolution that is connected to the depth and value of the relationship and the maturity of those involved. Now, there are very mature 13-year-olds and there are insanely immature 80-year-olds. So maturity is not in the context of age for this conversation. Maturity is in the context of this definition. One who accepts complete and total responsibility for themselves. Not blaming, not victim. One who says, I was wrong, I messed up, that's on me, I got to improve me. That's a very hard thing for anybody to do. It's a big challenge, because everyone wants to look good and be right. And so that's just human nature. Human nature is not designed for someone to look at themselves and have a problem with themselves. Human nature is designed for, people to see themselves differently than that. Because it requires an incredible amount of humility for one to acknowledge the issues that they are struggling with. And let me just give you some peace of mind. Every one of us is struggling with something. Everybody. If there's a person you know today that says they are not struggling with something today, it's because they just got out of the struggle and they got a minute before they go into the next struggle. Because they're either going into one, they're in one, or they're coming out of one, getting ready to go into another one. Especially for those who are high achievers, because high achievers have a higher standard for themselves than the world puts on them. So how do you teach people how to treat you? Well, step number one is this. You have to understand what your boundaries are. You must know what your boundaries are. If you do not know what your boundaries are, well then there's no limits. You are a city whose walls are torn down, and anyone and anything can come in and out of that city and plunder and pillage at any time, because there are no boundaries set up. So you first have to have a clear boundary for yourself. You have to understand for yourself what you are going to choose to accept from other people you are in relationship with. Now, you don't get the opportunity to teach people how to treat you that you meet on the daily. You go to Starbucks, somebody's staring at the muffins, and bada bing, bada boom, you get in line and they go, hi, I was there first. Somebody goes nuts. That's happened to everybody at one time or another, where somebody with their own issues jumps in your face. We're not talking about that. That gives you the opportunity to be a thermostat, not a thermometer, for you to just say all that toxic venom coming out of them has nothing to do with me. And you just say, bless your heart. That's Texas for, y'all know what that's Texas for, right? I don't have to say it. Bless your heart, hon. Why don't you get in front of me? And why don't you get a double shot, or something? So it's not that. It's people you are in relationship with, people that you see regularly. And particularly, the most challenging battlefield of all is the battlefield of familiar family relationships, because everybody is familiar with one another and everybody has history with one another. And it just gets very easy. When all of us go home, we all want to put our guards down and we all want to just be ourselves and just, let loose, because we've maybe been so buttoned up all day long that we want to just let loose. And it's typically among the people that you care about and love the most that tend to get the bottom of the barrel treatment. I remember probably 18 years ago when Angela and I were building our life together with children. We'll be married 25 years this year. We had just a few kids, and I was just doing my best to balance everything, and I was just a very angry guy, And I remember her one time telling me, if you treated me as well as you treat your clients, we would have an amazing marriage. Wow, that was a real eye-opener for me at that time, and I did not realize that that's how I was showing up. So many of us tend to treat ourselves and therefore those around us the way that we saw it modeled, maybe from great-grandma down to grandma, down to mom, down to you. And without an incredible amount of internal work, you are destined to repeat those behaviors and actions and activities again. So typically, you have the blessing of feedback, meaning you will have some challenges in your relationships where people say, hey, what's happening here is not working. So how do you teach people how to treat you? Well, ideally, you are in agreement with one another about here are the boundaries for our communication. Here's how we're going to speak with one another. In very tense moments, here's the standards we're going to set for ourselves. We're not going to allow ourselves to go down this path, and we're not going to allow ourselves to, whether it be name call or yell or whatever it may be. You have to know what your standards are and choose those standards. Here's the standards that we are going to choose. You choose them in peacetime, in preparation for battle time. Because if you have intimate relationships that are ongoing, my friend, there will be conflict regularly. It's just human nature, because we all go through different things at different times in our life, and conflict and the absence of conflict is not the goal. The goal is how to traverse conflict with both parties still feeling respected and understood. That is a lifelong work. It is a lifelong work because it requires an incredible amount of emotional maturity, and it requires an incredible amount of self-discipline when you're in a heated situation. So number one, you've got to know what your standards and your values are. Number two, you have to clearly articulate those to the parties that you would like to have that with. And then number three, very important, you've got to give yourself grace and give them grace when you miss it. Because at the end of the day, the saving grace is recognizing this. If you know their heart and they know your heart, and that you guys know you're on the same page, then you have the opportunity, being on the same page, to say, you know what? Okay, we're gonna get through this because we all have the same values, we have the same goals. Let's just work through this and let's figure it out. And you give yourself grace when you blow it. So number one, you have to know your standards and boundaries. Number two, you've got to communicate and articulate this with the other parties, what those boundaries are going to be. And number three, you got to have grace for yourself and for each other when you stumble and fall, understanding that it is progress, not perfection, that you're after. Just the awareness of these simple laws and principles should help you to teach others how to treat you. Have a great Monday, guys.